Richard Hamilton-Gray from TH Real Estate. We're a global asset management company with about $110 billion of assets under management. About 60% of the portfolios in North America, with the remaining amount in APAC and Europe. Sustainability for us has really become part and parcel of the business. We integrate ESG, so environmental, social and governance issues, throughout our investment management process. Into all of the products that we're launching, ESG is fully integrated. I think over the past 10 years, we've certainly seen a transition. ESG has definitely gone mainstream, of course, with the backdrop of the Sustainable Development Goals, the rise in the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and participation rates in the Principles for Responsible Investment. I think sustainability within the business has gone being the responsibility of perhaps a few people in a back office to now actually being the topic of conversation within the boardroom, and it's really a key way which we think that we can demonstrate to our clients that we're managing their capital responsibly.
Great. Clemens, just give us you know, Redevco's been a leader for a long time in this area, but just give us a sense of your role within that and Redevco.
Thank you, Richard. So Clemens Brenninkmeijer, Head of Sustainable Business Operations for Redevco. I've been with the company for about 17.5 years already, and probably for the last 11, sustainability has been an important topic in how we do business. The strapline that we use to describe that is business in balance, which is all about choosing to have a balanced approach for people, planet and profit in our decision making, in our target setting, and how we do our fund management, asset management and property management. It's about bringing the stakeholders together and trying to align on doing the right thing, on being a force for good in the real estate world, and hopefully encouraging all our partners to go along with us in that journey. And specifically my role in the last couple of years on the sustainable business operations side is to keep raising the bar, to keep challenging our board, to keep engaging with my colleagues across the European organization where we work, to make those steps that we think are important to drive our agenda.
Okay, good. Christiane.
Yeah, Christiane Conrad, PwC. PwC Legal. I had a German legal desk in London, and I'm a core real estate lawyer advising on real estate transactions. And one of my main focus, in addition to that, is sustainability. I've recently joined the committee of the ULI Sustainability Council in the UK to work on that front as well. And of course, at PwC, we have sustainability is when we look at our own offices. Our offices in London just have been reimagined, so sustainability plays a big part there. But also when giving legal advice, we try to suggest sustainable solutions to our clients. So, yeah.
Great, Kai.
Yeah, Kai Bakker, Cromwell Property Group. Cromwell is a diversified investment manager globally. We have 8 billion portfolio, of which around 4 billion is invested in Europe. In my role, I'm responsible for the sustainability approach for the European platform, which is a diversified portfolio. So I have challenges in almost all asset classes.
Okay, good. Let's just start with the overall picture. Maybe, Clemens, this is for you. Real estate is responsible for at least, if not more than 30% of the world's CO2 emissions. How much of a priority is sustainability? Do you see it as for your business as Redevco, and how much of it do you see it as for the industry as a whole, really?
I think you know, knowing that the real estate sector as a whole is responsible for such a huge part of energy consumption and CO2 emissions, if you put it into the global frameworks of the Paris Agreement, UN SDGs, the challenges that we have to work together to keep climate change and global warming to sub 2 degrees or preferably sub 1.5 degrees, our sector as a whole has a huge role to play. We can't ignore that, and therefore I think as a sector we should be doing more. We should be taking a leading role in demonstrating that things are possible, but only if we work together, only if we're willing to share knowledge, know-how, experiences of how to do that in an effective way. I think for us as a business, we take it seriously. We're a family business that has been around for 6 generations, 170 years. We'd like to be around for another 170 years, but that means we've got to have a planet that can also sustain that. The way it's going at the moment, if we don't do anything, you know, there is a risk that that's going to be a lot more challenging. So our ambition, our desire to want to make conscious choices to you know, manage our portfolios in a way that is trying to reduce negative impact, possibly also achieve more positive impact, and in any case get on the path and share with others how we're doing it and try and entice our colleagues to do the same, is something that we feel strongly about, and we're you know, willing to share that passion and hopefully you know, use the results to show that it is possible and encourage others to join us on that journey.
Richard, pick up that point if you will, and also I mean, Clemens there mentioned about, you know, longer term, meaning really over the significantly longer term of another 170 years. How do you see responsible investment in your terms, and pick up any of the points that Clemens raised?
I think responsible investment, as I said before, is really around the integration of environmental, social and governance issues into our investment decision making. I mean, certainly from our perspective, we think that the integration of ESG can help reduce long-term value erosion in the light of some of the structural trends which real estate is focusing. Yes, around climate change and the shift towards a low-carbon economy, but also in terms of technological advancements, for example. So for us, we think that sustainability can certainly help protect value, but also help activate certain value as well. I would reiterate the point regarding the need for collaboration. I think that real estate is a terrible industry for being fragmented. And I think that the traditional barriers around landlord-tenant, around managers perhaps not being collaborative as they could be, I think that we really need to think hard about how we're going to overcome some of those barriers in order to achieve the scale at the required pace to meet some of the commitments that were laid out at the Paris Accord and the net zero carbon agenda, which I know we're going to touch on later.
Okay, good. And if there's any journalists who I don't know who are here, you're not allowed to say that Richard just said real estate is a terrible industry. Good. Kai, let's pick that up from your side, because obviously Cromwell as well, like TH Global. Are there differences that you're seeing in terms of, I guess, your response to it here in Europe to how it's being responded to by Cromwell in other parts of the world?
Well, we're originally an Australian business, and in all benchmarks you see the Australians lead the way for sustainability. I actually don't know how that is. Maybe it's because it's a very young country and they're very dynamic in their regulations, and they integrated a very good system on regulations what's enabled sustainability. But I think from looking at my colleagues, I can align our view. I think the supply chain management within real estate is very important. We have a great responsibility as an investment manager to ensure that we engage our supply chain and our stakeholders on this topic, because due to the fragmented, let's say, responsibility, change can be hard to adapt over the whole supply chain. And I would also agree with Clemens. I think it's very important to mention the link to the Paris Agreement multiple times, because I will expect that we see legislation changes coming our way more rapidly, which will definitely have an impact on value.
Okay, good. And Christiane, pick up that point, if you will, in terms of regulation. And where do you see the change coming from? I suppose, is it coming from the pools of capital? Is it coming from regulation? Where do you see the balance of that?
I think it will be definitely regulation. I think everybody can feel it. The last month, the summer, it was just incredible. We all enjoyed it, but you can, I think, from a personal perspective, you can really feel the difference in climate change, that it's really happening. And we had many talks the last month also to bring the different stakeholders together. So I can only agree with what has been said already today. So it's so difficult to bring the different stakeholders together. So particularly in retail. So it's a funny story. We learned a lot that evening, but we invited our retail tenants, our clients, which we advise on the lease law, and then we invited our investor clients investing in retail. So, and it was the discussion started immediately. It was a very active discussion between both of them. But what I learned from that was really there are so different points of view, different points of interests, that in particular, I think for you, it's much more difficult to really work together with these tenants. So really strong market power, at least in Germany. So they are under hot pressure when you look at the e-commerce development. So we learned a lot that evening. So, but I think you really, to persuade these people to work together, also regulation is needed. So, and there will be a change in regulations, I think. So otherwise, this morning it was in the German TV, I don't know, in the Frühstücksfernsehen, Breakfast TV, who saw it, but that the current climate change goals are not sufficient. So because otherwise, if we are not completely carbon neutral by mid-century, that will be a disaster, to put it in easy words. So, and I think that's really on the agenda of the governments, and I think they will be the main driver for the next years.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that, many of you may be familiar with the Financial Stability Board's Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. Quite a mouthful, but effectively it's a framework which has been developed by a number of investment banks and also a variety of other people. But they talk about transition risks and some of the key risks which real estate is going to, well, not just real estate, but real estate, given its materiality in terms of overall carbon emissions, are going to face on the shift to the low carbon economy. And they highlight the regulatory pressures as a real material risk, a transition risk. And those asset managers and those landlords that can actually help position their assets beyond compliance now are going to be able to protect against some of that valuation risk and obsolescence risk over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, go.
Totally agree, but one of the big challenges or one of the requirements for that to really manifest itself in different behavior is for the valuation industry to really start taking sustainability risk, climate risk into account in valuations. And that today is still not happening sufficiently, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the RICS Red Book was re-released last year after a consultation, and in there is now an explicit reference to sustainability and climate change, although I completely agree that the kind of detailed or the link between sustainability and value isn't closely or well enough articulated. I think the valuation community would say our job is to reflect the market, not to create the market.
Okay, good. Well, we all know where we need to go immediately after this discussion, to the RIC stand there. Good. Sorry, Kai, you wanted to pick that up. I know the discussion with the values, and I think indeed the value should represent the market, and sustainability for them is a difficult topic. But we already now see the first signs of the regulation changing. In the Netherlands, we have a target for office buildings based around the EPC system, which makes it unable to lease or sell a building with an EPC certificate higher than C. And I think that will be the first sign, something, let's say, that valuers can hold on to, that you will see a value change for those office buildings that don't comply to that regulation running up to 2023. And I think, indeed, for valuers, it will be necessary to have some legislation as some
way for them to calculate the risk on value.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, in the UK, the piece of legislation which you were referring to has been transposed by that European directive into something called the UK Minimum Energy Efficiency Standards, and that essentially makes it unlawful to let a property below a certain energy performance threshold. So the UK government have set the level as an E. You've obviously gone further and set it as C, which I think is absolutely the right direction of travel. But I completely agree with that piece of legislation in the UK has impacted on pricing, impacted on liquidity, and it's really helped shift market behaviour, which is, of course, what the overall ambition is.
Yeah, it makes it. You can hold on now to the brown discount. There is a way to touch it.
Okay, and one of the important things that's obviously in general has helped, I suppose, transparency, but also the ability to be able to check performance has been benchmarking. Clemens, in terms of your view, how important is setting targets, benchmarking to drive forward this agenda? And do you think, I mean, picking up that point, do you think people should be trying to be more ambitious, especially in the light of the news that you mentioned today, which is that maybe we're not, the goals that are set at the moment aren't aggressive enough?
Yeah, in the end, fully agree that we need to be more ambitious. I think when the Dutch government came out with their proposal to do the C label for offices, on the one hand, I think there was a lot of consternation amongst office investors saying, "Oh my God, what's this going to do for my portfolio?" On the other hand, for those who see where this is going, there was a certain reflection to say, well, why not immediately just go to label A? Benchmarking is, of course, important. Typically, benchmarking, if it's done well, tends to stimulate companies to want to outperform the benchmark. So there is a certain value in trying to progress that. But for me or for us as a company, I think it's more about just the choices you make yourself to do the right thing. We look at sustainability in a more holistic view. It's not just about energy. Yes, energy is an important part of it, but it's not just that. It's also health and well-being. It's about having places where people want to spend time, where you have the dynamism and the vibrancy of living, working, leisure, shopping all together in places that consumers want to be. And if you can facilitate that by having a more holistic approach, then I think that's already an important way to go. But it's also important to look at the impact, especially with climate change, the way it's been presented today, and helping to work towards that net zero carbon discussion that is starting to come on the agenda.
And yes, sorry, Richard, go.
I was just, in terms of benchmarking, again, completely. I do think that it can play an important role. You'll hear about the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, which is the leading benchmark for sustainability performance in the real estate market. It represents about 2/3 of all real estate assets globally. And a number of our investors into our funds, admittedly the large Dutch pension funds, they've set they're making allocation decisions based on the performance of those respective portfolios within that benchmark. Of course, if allocation decisions are starting to be made on that, then again, that should hopefully drive market behavior as well. But I think, what's really important is that we've got the right people actually looking, and that yes, a benchmark is key. Yes, a certificate, a piece of certification is key, but actually, there's a lot of other things which you touched on, which aren't yet captured in these benchmarks and certification schemes, but actually potentially do add wider value, and I think it's important to recognise that.
And I just wanted to pick up with you for a second, Christiane. You mentioned that you just joined the ULI Sustainability Committee, and we've already mentioned a little bit about collaboration. What's your sense of that? Do you see the investment managers, and we've got them represented here, but do you see them collaborating, and do you think that is the way forward? And also, is this to do with not just the investment managers collaborating, but everywhere down the whole process?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I think what's already been achieved between with investment managers working together is is incredible. It's very impressive. But the issues we are facing here right now, as we said before, is involving the other stakeholders, like the tenants, the facility managers, the property managers. But what's also trying to do right now is to kind of start the collaboration with the energy industry. So, and I think this takes so much time. It's important that we do it, but it doesn't pay out from the very first second. It's a huge investment you have to make. And the first thing is to listen to each other and to understand the other issues, the different viewpoints. Because the energy industry, for example, they don't understand what the investment managers are facing, their challenges. They have completely other topics on their agenda. So this is really a long process. It has already started. But I think, we need to be a bit more ambitious, to put it in your words.
And maybe just picking up with you as well, Clemens. I mean, we mentioned earlier, and Christiane mentioned engaging with occupiers, and for Redevco, obviously retail. But how, what are you doing in order to, I guess, rather than talk the talk, actually walk the walk and make a difference? And I guess you're having to put in initiatives with your retailers because otherwise you can't achieve the standards that you want to achieve without their help.
That's absolutely correct. Especially in the last 6 or 7 years, we have been much more clear about our ambitions when we first start discussions with our retailers, bringing them along with a particular ambition that we want to achieve. We obviously can make the biggest steps in our own portfolio when we're redeveloping our assets. So those are the moments to really try and make those big steps forward. And we've found in our experience that trying to force things by putting a green lease in front of them that requires them to do this or to do that or to share this or share that, that has tended to really kind of get a lot of pushback, and they're kind of like, you worry on your own business and I'll worry on mine. So we've taken a different approach and just said, well, let's start with an ambition level, trying to talk about what we would like to do, and let's see how we can actually help you as a retailer to make certain choices that are going to benefit your business, your bottom line, and that will therefore also indirectly or directly impact us, but where we're not specifically just looking to say, well, if we can squeeze a few cents off the service charges or your electricity bill, then you can pay us a few extra cents in rent. That discussion's a non-starter, so stay away from that and just look at how we can actually collaborate, learn, and help each other. And so far, I think with that attitude, that approach, we've actually been able to achieve some pretty cool results. We try to track energy consumption, for example, pre-development and post-development. And with a number of them that we've done in the Netherlands and in Germany in the last couple of years, we've typically achieved a 40 to 50% reduction in energy consumption and in the corresponding CO2 emissions intensity. So, it's a start. Is it perfect? No, but we take the learning from every particular case and we apply it again the next time. And hopefully it gets better.
Yeah, did you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. That's exactly I think it's the only way it can work. So, and also when you talk about green lease agreements, you can forget contractual penalty clauses or really mandatory regulations in there. So that's what we implemented. We developed some concepts for green leases and green facility and property management agreements in Germany. And what we learned there and what was our main focus, to really see where we can give additional services to the tenants to persuade them, okay, you will actually be better if you agree to these agreements. In the end, you will be more efficient, you will save your money, you will have a better overview of the performance of the whole building and also your property, your premises. So that's the only way it can work. So in Germany, it's still very difficult to get all the data from the tenants. It's different in the UK, but from a historical view, it's more, German tenants are more reluctant to give away their data. So this is in Germany, it's a starting point, because without the data, you don't know the performance of your building. So this is really the first step, the challenge to overcome.
Oh, that's interesting.
I was just going to say, you know, real estate is becoming a much diverse or a more diverse asset class, and you know, there's increasing allocations, not just you know, the conventional offices and multi-let offices and retail, but now actually data centers, industrial warehouses. You know, senior living accommodation, and the point is that as the landlord, our ability to influence, you know, the operational performance of those buildings is more limited than what it is on the large multi-let offices, where, you know, we control the central plant, for example, and therefore the only way that we're going to achieve, you know, the net zero carbon agenda, the only way that we're going to be, you know, achieve some of the targets that have been set out as part of COP21 and the Paris Accord is via engaging with that quite an increasingly significant component of portfolios that are managed directly by the tenant.
Okay, that's interesting. Kai, you wanted to pick something up earlier, and I'd also like to just feed into this. You mentioned that Australia was ahead in a lot of these ways. Are there things that we can learn in Europe from what you've seen in Australia, whether that's about data providing more information or more transparency in the market around these areas?
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of synergy with my co-speakers here today. Data is not just in Germany a challenge. I hear that challenge across Europe. I hear that challenge in Australia as well. I think what they have ahead of us in Australia is the engagement piece with their tenants. It's a topic that is not just started by the landlord, but it is also started by the broker. It is started by the tenant. So there's a clear alignment in sustainability in Australia, and I think that is something we can definitely learn from as a sector here in Europe. The data challenge, well, I think we all face that, and it doesn't really matter which country. It grows across the board, I've learned. And it's so important to have the data to set the mindset and change the mindset. It's something at Cromwell we're focusing on now. I think carbon neutral is a really high aim, and it will take some years to get used to that target. Currently I'm working with kilowatt hours per square meter, which is a really powerful measurement across all asset classes you can use, and I see that coming through in the benchmarks as well. I think this year it's also new for GRESB to share kilowatt hours per square meter, which puts it into perspective very easily.
Yeah, I think we also need to recognize that even though this topic has been around for a long time, it hasn't yet necessarily become truly mainstream, and there's just a huge kind of education gap to get the decision makers up to a level where they can make decisions confidently about also the impact on the future value of their portfolios that they're looking after on behalf of their investor clients. So yes, the push from the money is important, the education piece is important, and I think we need to also be willing to share the best practices and the case studies of how do you actually do this. Because it's not easy, and we've got a long way to go, and it's you know, we have to help each other, I think.
Yeah, I think you know, obviously we're managing, we're primarily managing third-party capital, and a large number of our investors have set their own decarbonisation targets, which of course means over the next couple of years they're going to be repositioning their portfolio and divesting away from those carbon-intensive industries and allocating more to those asset classes that enable them to meet those targets. What's significant on the data piece is that if investors want to know their total carbon footprint, we have to get the tenant data. We have to provide them with reliable, validated data in order for them to know what their total carbon exposure is.
Okay, good. Kai, you wanted to pick that up?
Yeah, the educational piece is so important. I see it at Cromwell as well. Globally we have 5 people dedicated to sustainability, but we have a 350 FTE team. And just those 5 people dedicated to sustainability will never make the change that is necessary. It needs this whole team So the educational piece in that is for us a very large focus for everybody, from the property manager to the asset manager to the CEO, to have a clear focus on sustainability, and but also bring that with front of mind in every decision that you make, because that makes it cheaper to integrate and easier, because people then are noses are aligned to the same direction.
Maybe also another thought that we've tried and that seems to get a little bit of traction, especially with retail tenants who perhaps are at first instance are a bit more standoffish. We just ask, our retail tenant counterparties, how important is the health and well-being of your store staff? And then you kind of see them think, and they're like, well, I can't exactly say no. Okay, well, if the health and well-being of your store staff is important, how can we help you make decisions about making your stores a better place to work? And then you can have the discussion around all sorts of different sustainability measures that in the end will help them, as well as, in the end, hopefully having a more future-proof asset, one that the retailer is happy trading from, the one that consumers like to come and shop in. And those kinds of things, I think, for me, also all add up to having a more future-proof portfolio.
There has to be a benefit to the tenants, and for a lot of our FRI portfolio that's managed directly by them, I'm thinking about our industrial portfolio, for example. We as a landlord have paid a company to go and do electric vehicle feasibility studies at each of those sites to then at least have something that we can, a study, a report to pick up and actually provide as a foundation for a future conversation around, okay, look, did you know that the electric vehicle market is going to increase by X% over the next 10 years? Don't you think as a logistics company you should, prepare your asset to make it more resilient to those changes? Yeah, okay, great. Well, how about putting some solar panels on the roof as well then? So it's about starting the conversation.
Okay, good. We're running out of time, sadly, but I just wanted to pick up a couple of points. I think I'm right, Clemens, that you've sort of set a goal to have your whole portfolio carbon neutral by 2030. Is that right? 2020? 2050?
Not quite.
Okay.
No, I think it's a fair point. We're working on a new kind of ambition statement for our portfolio, where we have been focusing in the past on BREEAM certification, taking a more holistic view, but actually to also get the engagement of our 200 employees and not just the 5 or 6 that like talking about sustainability, trying to make a much more tangible target that even they can say has impact. So hence, putting it in the context of the Paris Agreement, the UN SDGs, the advancing net zero agenda of the World Green Building Council and the country Green Building Councils, we are trying to say, let's at least put the ambition there as carbon neutral in operation by 2040. We recognize that is super ambitious. We don't even know if it's achievable, but that's not really the point. I think the point is it's about galvanizing the whole team to get on board and to say, let's get moving. Let's start to have the conversations with our stakeholders, and let's see what's possible. Let's find out if we can get the next redevelopment we do to be fully off natural gas. Let's just take natural gas off the equation, focus purely on electric systems, and let's see what then the increase in electricity consumption is. And then let's see what we can do in terms of energy on-site generation or off-site generation. And we just build it from there. And it will be case study by case study where we have to learn over the coming 15, 20, 30 years. But let's get started.
And for the others, in terms of the practicality of that, how practical is it, given that a lot of portfolios are standing assets, easier to do, and you mentioned this as well, Clemens, easier to do if it's new build or even where you've got the opportunity to put in redevelopment, but for standing assets, how practical is kind of carbon neutral portfolios in general? Kai, you can start that if you want.
Well, I think, yeah, thank you. yearly you only add 1% to the stock. So 99% is already there. So indeed, we really have to focus on existing stock, and not every building can be carbon neutral. There's definitely part of the stock that is out there now will become obsolescent. So I think that's a really a powerful element to consider during your technical due diligence. I think you don't have to think in difficulties. You have to think in challenges. We had some great case studies transforming buildings from very low EPC labels to A+, which actually isn't the standard, because you cannot, for existing stock, you cannot go higher than A, but you can definitely meet the A+ standards for existing stock. So you have to think in challenges and not so much in threats, I think. Again, doing something like that will require cooperation of your stakeholders. If a tenant isn't on board on that journey, then the ambition very rapidly changes, and it will be solely focused on an economic perspective. So it's really again, it becomes important to keep your stakeholders aligned in that mission.
Okay, good. We've gone past our allocated time, but to make sure you can also be at your next meetings, I've got one quick question. So brief answers to this. So future and next steps, I've put this down as, which is, okay, so what are the next steps needed for measuring performance and driving long-term sustainable investment to reach the carbon neutral portfolio by 2040, which we've all agreed is a good thing. So what are the next steps? My personal guess is that if we're back in, we'll assess this next year, and my bet is that when we look at it in 5 years' time, we'll have reduced that down to 2030 from 2040, but I don't know, because technology is moving at such a rapid pace. But let's start with you, Richard. Quickly, next steps, how to reach that goal.
Well, I mean, we've already set a 30% reduction target by 2030, but which we're doing well on. We are going to develop a net zero carbon pathway to work out the intervention packages that are needed over the next 30 years. I think clearly we need to look at where we can expand renewables, where we can electrify heat, but then also move beyond operational performance to look at things like embodied carbon, which we haven't even talked about today.
Great. Clemens?
I think there's a saying that we tend to, I think it's underestimate what we can do in a year. Sorry, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 3 years. For me, it's about continuing all these things that Rich has also just mentioned, just starting to have the conversations with all the stakeholders and not holding back, saying, let's try things. And if you pilot a few things, you'll learn, and from that learning, you'll be able to take the next steps.
Great. Christiane?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Testament said before, and we need to continue the discussions. Sharing the case studies is super important, involving all the stakeholders, and then in the end, I don't really like that I have to say it, but I really think that we need more regulations.
Okay.
I will continue to be an ambassador for this topic, make sure that it is on the agenda at the board in every meeting they have, and I think that's really important. And then on the work floor as well, engage people, engage our stakeholders, and set ambitions. I think our next step will be ensuring that the contracts internally are in place to have, let's say, the framework set to make these changes.
Okay, great.